Vern, can you confirm the mixer changed? It doesn't look like it's changing on my end.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan, and this is the live call-in show where we talk about what people believe and why every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time. And every single week, I have a very special guest. This week's guest is no different. He is the wonderful, fantastic Mr. Ross Blocher. Ross, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. Great to be here, Dan. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So in case you guys have been living under a rock and you don't know who Ross is, you're going to like him. If you like this show, you'll like Ross Blocher. He is one of two hosts of Oh No, Ross and Carrie, the podcast that's been going on, as I just recently learned as of this week, about 10 years, which is awesome.
That's wild. Yeah. 10 years goes really quickly when you're investigating fringe science, alternative medicine, claims of the paranormal. It's been a lot of fun.
Look at this guy. He's a podcaster introducing his own stuff. Yes. So Ross does investigations along with his co-host Carrie on everything that we talk about on this show, guys. I mean, Ross, you've investigated Scientology, and by investigated, I mean became members of Scientology. Right. You guys became Mormons. You guys have talked to psychics. You tried drugs in other countries. I mean, you've done the whole thing. Like, you've lived a great life. I gotta say, it's great living vicariously through your podcast. So I'm really excited to have you on today's show. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, vicariously and virosly.
Oh, that's good.
You know, the show gives me an excuse to do all these things that, you know, when I talk to people like you who are kind of similarly predisposed, they think they're jealous. They think like, that's so cool that you've gotten to do this stuff. One of our taglines for the show, though, is, you know, we show up so you don't have to. I think for a lot of people, they enjoy listening because they would love to know what it's like to join Scientology, but they sure as heck don't want to get anywhere near the Church of Scientology. So our undying curiosity can hopefully at least answer those questions for them.
Yes, absolutely. And so again, I highly recommend it. You guys should check it out. But after you listen to this show, of course. But Ross, you've also been involved with the Center for Inquiry. You've been doing work for them. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, actually, the Center for Inquiry is where Carrie and I met. And I've been kind of active there since shortly before I left the faith. I was an evangelical Christian my whole life growing up and into my college years. And so after I lost my faith, I was looking for community and first found skepticism and scientific understanding of the world through the Skeptic Society, then went to CFI. And I quickly got involved with the Independent Investigations Group, which is now the CFIIG. It's no longer independent. It's very dependent upon CFI. So it's the Center for Inquiry Investigations Group. And what we're best known for is for administering a $250,000 paranormal challenge for proof of claims of the paranormal. So that's another thing I've been doing for over 15 years now.
Yeah, which is great because we like talking about the paranormal on here as well, and all the other stuff you're talking about. So again, folks, if in case you're listening to this live, again, this is a live call-in show. We're going to get to your calls in just a little bit here after Ross and I talk for a bit, but go ahead and call the number on the screen if you want to talk to us, or if you're listening to this later, come check it out live. It's live on YouTube at Truth Wanted. Check out the YouTube channel from there. So anyway, Ross, you just recently, you're in the process of wrapping up your most recent investigation. I say most recent investigation. You actually started this I don't know how, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, like a long time coming for this one. You went to the Bob Larson School of Exorcism.
Yes.
And you are now a licensed exorcist. You got your certification. Can you show it to the camera?
Yeah, absolutely. This is my certificate, digitally signed by Bob Larson.
So in case you guys don't know, Bob Larson is, he's an exorcist, or he claims to be one. He goes around the world doing these exorcisms and has a whole school of exorcisms, apparently. Oh, there's the cross. He's got a cross on screen right now.
Anointed by Bob Larson, only cost $100.
That's a lot. Like I imagine you could just go to, I don't know, your local Christian bookstore and get something for less, but it's not going to be blessed by Bob Ross. I mean, I don't know if it's blessed, I guess. If it's anointed, is it the same thing? I don't know.
Yeah.
You're the expert here now, Ross. You have to tell me.
Yeah, so that's right. I am now a certified exorcist. The way I didn't get my scare quotes fully in screen there. The certified exorcist, and yes, as you mentioned, this is our longest running investigation. So we always have some in the background that are kind of ongoing, and then we'll do faster things where we're going to visit a reflexologist or an ear candler or attending a seminar or something like that. But very early on, we found out that Bob, who is a Protestant minister. Most people associate exorcism with Catholicism, and he was doing a live exorcism in Pasadena. So we went to go check that out, and then we found out that he was offering coursework. So after we published that initial investigation about that exorcism we attended, we then went to we kept going to additional exorcisms, and we started taking the coursework, and we've been working on this for years, learning all the ins and outs of performing exorcisms.
Yeah, and surprisingly, not a lot of exorcisms in that actual training. A lot of Bible trivia is what I would call it. I don't know, but you guys should listen to it and check it out. That's the most recent one on the show. It's like an 11-part show.
It's a long series, and I got to admit, there's still a little more to unpack in that one. But yeah, if you're really into sort of the theological underpinnings of demonology and deliverance ministry, we really get into it. We unpack it a lot.
So I was wondering, because you and I, for those of you who don't know, I was also a former Christian as well, and so we talk about transitions of ideas and transitions of identities on this show a lot, and you've talked about your story a little bit on your podcast, but I was wondering, like, what is it like now, or how do you reflect on that transition of identity? Because from what I understand, you grew up as an evangelical Christian. I mean, you were living that life, and now you're doing pretty much the exact opposite thing you could be doing, like as an evangelical Christian, which is just debunking just everything. So, like, can you talk about that experience a little bit, as far as like, what does that mean to you now, that identity you had and now that you don't have, and how do you identify now? What does that look like?
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. There's so many different components to that. Well, I mean, every now and then it kind of hits me just how absurd it would have sounded to high school me or even early college me if you'd said that someday I would be an atheist, because growing up, I'd never even met an atheist or someone who was out as a non-believer. And so just the idea would have been absurd to me. And I think one thing I've noticed is that my core personality hasn't changed. I'd say I'm the same curious, nerdy guy that I ever was.
Sure.
But now I'm kind of coming at it from the other perspective. And I maintain that same interest in belief. And even when I was a Christian, I remember whenever the Scholastic book orders would come to school, I would get everything I could about ghosts and aliens. And I had an 8th grade teacher who got me into conspiracy theories for a while.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like reading the Montauk Project and Behold the Pale Horse and stuff like that.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Right. Yeah,
you're in 8th grade reading that? That's not good.
And that was my Christian school science teacher, right?
Oh, but
no. Looking back.
Ross and Carrie. Oh, no. Anyway.
Right, exactly. Looking back, I can say I had this incipient interest in all of those topics, and I had my own little theories for how I meshed my Christian beliefs with those interests, where I thought if you'd asked me what aliens were, I would have said they were demons, or something like that. But when I came out of the world of belief, I was still every bit as much interested. And I can still honestly say that I read the Bible more than most Christians, and I probably go to church more than a lot of Christians.
You go to a lot of churches.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if it comes down to just a matter of, let's say, a Pascal's wager type calculation, I probably have more spiritual insurance than almost anybody you'll meet.
You got a point. There. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting. I like you, I grew up in just a certain way of thinking and a certain way of living. And I don't feel like I am so much different. I mean, I guess I'm different in the sense I can be more honest with myself.
Right.
I think the culture I grew up in, my Christian culture, and everybody's Christian culture is kind of different. But the one that I had was, you kind of have to toe the line a little bit. You have to kind of say the things that we all are supposed to believe are true, even if you don't fully believe it yourself, because it's better to have faith than to not have faith. So I think that's different about me now. I think I am much more open about evaluating the things that I believe are true or not. Whereas I don't know if, church isn't really the space to evaluate the beliefs as much as they want you to think it is, right? It's more like, you kind of have to go with the flow with everybody else is doing.
There's a certain prescribed domain of questions that you're allowed to ask.
Yeah.
And I think I can honestly point to my upbringing and say that I was encouraged to think critically, again, within a certain domain. And there was a process, and I had to come to a certain point where I allowed myself to just sort of poke through the edge of that prescribed area where I could ask questions. And as Thomas Jefferson would say, to question with boldness even the existence of God, for if there be one, he would much prefer the homage of reason to that of blindfolded fear. That was kind of that step that I had to take to sort of reorganize my priorities. But yeah, like I still kind of consider myself in many ways, and Carrie and I talk about this a lot on the show. She was also a evangelical Christian growing up. And I think in many ways we're still culturally Christians because we're imbued with the music and the thought patterns and the biblical references and all of that's still running in the back of my head all the time. And that's part of who I am.
Yeah.
So I can still easily kind of go into that mode, at least think from that perspective. And of course, I'm sure you have stories about this. I still have a lot of family. Almost all my family is all Christian. The parts of my family that aren't Mormon or Jewish. They're all rooting for me to come back as, the lost sheep.
Wayward
son, prodigal son.
I definitely have family members as well who are probably expecting the same thing from me. And we should get our families to listen to each other's shows. Maybe that would help, right?
There we go. Absolutely. I think there's always this hope that Ross will come back and he'll be an even stronger Christian because he's gone through all of these investigations and he'll finally see the truth again. And that's fine. They can keep hoping.
Isn't that interesting, though, that the strength of one's belief is also a testament to someone's character, in a sense? Like, if you know what I mean, like the way that I grew up, again, like going back to my personal experience, and again, I recognize other people's experiences might be different, but it was more like, the more you believe, the more you trusted in this thing that you couldn't necessarily prove or you couldn't demonstrate the truth of. There was a nobility to that. In some sense. And
it was a virtue to believe without seeing. And the Bible has many examples of that. Blessed are those who believe even though they have not seen.
But Ross, I've talked to Christian apologists who say that this isn't even how we're supposed to interpret Christianity at all. I've heard this interpretation that no, faith is a thing that you can philosophically come to through logic and reason, or it's an evidence-based thing. And I don't know, when I hear that, I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, first of all, I don't think the Bible doesn't support itself, but I don't think the Bible supports that view. You know what I mean? Like I think you can tie a lot of stories there where that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But, I feel like that's an area where they want to have it both ways at the same time. And, depending on who they're talking to, they'll say different things. And again, I say they, knowing that I was once them as well. In that, they, I think, believers understand that faith is essential because God, however apparent you want to think that he has made his presence in nature or the word or what have you, it could be clearer. There would theoretically be nothing stopping God from rearranging the stars at night so everyone on planet sees the message that says, yes, I am here in your language, whatever it is. He could do that. Why not?
He could.
And he chooses not. He either can't or he chooses not to. And that's a decision that says something about God. And so you can say that it is manifestly evident or all the evidence is there. But when you really try to pin that down, I don't think that bears out.
Yeah. And there are some people that say, oh, well, it's like everything you see around us, that this is evidence enough. The fact that you and I are here on this earth and all the good things that happen in people's lives and stuff.
Right.
And it's
Wake up breathing every morning. Yeah. That's,
But that's for anything. That's for anything. That doesn't mean the Christian God. That doesn't mean,
how is that not just as much evidence for Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva? You could argue that any which way. So I think the important thing to say is that, and I think you'd probably agree, we remain open to evidence. And so we want to hear it. By all means, if you've got something we haven't considered or some new angle, we want to hear it, and we'll take it into due consideration.
And that's true for anybody calling into the show, by the way. Please, if you have a claim and you want to talk to us, listen, Ross has been around the block, okay? I know we've had a couple of former Scientologists come that have called into the show. I'm hoping they'll call in tonight to talk to you, Ross, about your experience with that. But also, I mean, you've just done. I mean, I know you can't even remember probably how much you've done. It's incredible. Like and you get asked this a lot, I'm sure. So I'm hoping you have an answer prepared. But in everything that you've investigated, has there been anything that has surprised you to its validity, or have you had your mind changed on something? Maybe you were more skeptical of it, but you found it was more real. Has that happened at all, or is, I imagine it's not the typical, but
yeah, to varying degrees. I mean, some investigations, and now after 10 years, we've done literally hundreds of them, which is crazy. Sometimes we come in with a lot of foreknowledge and sort of. I won't say our mind's made up, but a lot of foregone conclusions that we have to be either disabused of or that are confirmed. But I would say that I can point to a few examples where we've been either pleasantly surprised, or at the very least, we usually find some good takeaways where a particular group has found some really good insights that we think, I can pluck this one piece of information, this filter, this way of looking at the world, and kind of actually use that in my everyday life. And I don't think it's intellectually inconsistent to cherry pick if you're at least realizing what you're doing, and if it's something that can live apart from the supernatural claims. But to answer your question more specifically, I'll say hypnotherapy pleasantly surprised us. Not that I believe kind of their models of the brain and what's happening under the influence of hypnotherapy, but I do think that they've found like a really good system of accountability for certain goals, like for certain things that people are trying to achieve or affect in their lives, certainly not for getting rid of cancer or something like that.
Sure.
So we found that to be really helpful. We really liked laughter yoga. That was something that we joined, which really doesn't involve yoga in any way you would think of the term. It's really just adults getting together to make themselves laugh, first artificially, but very quickly it becomes just honest to goodness laughter, and it's awesome. We fully endorse that.
That's interesting. Huh.
And one I always point to is a speed reading course that we took.
Yes. I just listened to this episode very recently. I was going to ask you about it because I was like, it sounded like it kind of worked. Like, I don't know what you thought about that now.
So it was a one-day course that we took at like a Hyatt attached to an airport or something like that. And we kind of came in thinking like, you can't quickly flip through a book and get anything out of it. I think, the Woody Allen joke was, I read War and Peace in 5 minutes. It's about Russia.
I haven't heard that. That's funny.
Like, I think, it takes special human wiring to do anything even approximating that. And so a lot of that is nonsense. And there's, very controversial and borderline useless concepts within there, like subvocalization and stuff like that. There might be some argument for it. But what I did get out of the course was a lot of confidence building and some really useful reading tips that I ended up kind of applying to my own reading life. And I quickly discovered that there was a positive correlation between the amount of reading I was doing and my enjoyment of life. And so I went from reading like 18 books a year, which would have been a really good year for me then, to now reading about a book a week on average, which is
nice.
Awesome. And I'm not even reading any faster. I think reading more efficiently and with more confidence.
Yeah, I was particularly interested in this because I did 25 books last year. And
Nice.
I wanted to see if I could double that this year. I am way behind. I'm not doing good.
That's a tall order. My goodness.
It's a tall order. A lot of it's audiobooks. I'm not going to lie.
No.
Because
no shaming,
Yeah.
reading audiobook is still a book.
I agree. But I was kind of curious. Is this speed reading thing worth looking into? Because that might be useful for me. Because
it's funny
I do enjoy my books. Yeah.
That course that I took, I want to say it was with Iris something. Anyways, it gave just kind of a shotgun approach of just hitting you with different tips and techniques, like, finger scanning. And one that I really like is just sort of timing yourself reading 10 pages in a row of a book. And then I have actually a little Excel calculator that I made where I plug in those 10 averages and then put in the total number of pages in the page I'm on, and it spits out an estimate of how long it's going to take me to finish that book. Little things like that, or even not reading ahead, but looking ahead just to see the structure of the book and when you're going to hit a certain point. Like, all of that just helps kind of disambiguate the process and take some of the mystification and fear out of it. So it made me a better reader.
Well, there you go. So, folks, if you think speed reading is real or not real, you can call into the show and we could talk about it right now. We're going to get to calls in just a sec. But before we do, I have to give thanks to the patron of the week. That's right, folks. Every single week, I give a shout out to our special patrons. For those who donate on patreon.com/truthwanted, you guys are the ones that make this show happen. Just a reminder, I don't get paid to do this show. Almost none of the crew gets paid to do this show, except for some of our full-time staff and contractors. It's all the show, the microphone stand and all the equipment. It's all done by you guys, folks who donate to the show. So thank you guys for doing that. And this week's special patron is waiting for it. It's coming on the screen any second now. I know the crew's got it. They're working on it. Come on, crew. I don't see a name yet, but there it is. Mackenzie Quattlebaum. Thank you, Mackenzie, for donating to the show. And if you would like to donate to the show, again, it's patreon.com/truthwanted. Really appreciate everybody who donates on there. You guys are fantastic and make this show worth doing. Wouldn't be a show without you guys. Thank you guys so much. And now it's time to get to some calls. Ross, you ready to do some calls?
Let's do some calls.
All right, cool. First, we're going to talk to we got some interesting ones here, but I want to start with Will, who's calling in from Texas. Will, you're on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hi, Ross and Dan. It's Will. I am a former Catholic in an ongoing dialogue with my sister, who is a current Catholic. And one of the speed bumps we hit in our conversation recently is about signs, dreams, and visions. So she's had some signs and dreams and visions that hit a speed bump in our conversation. So in your dialogue with her, she's kind of citing the signs, like the dreams and visions. Is she's personally having as like evidence for her belief? Is that what's going on? Oh, sorry, you cut out. Can you repeat that? Yeah.
So is she citing her own personal visions and dreams as evidence for her belief in God? Is that what's happening?
Yes, it's some of her own visions and dreams that are causing her to.
And are these like premonitory visions? Is she seeing things before they happen, or is she getting like great insight from these?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So, for example, she had a dream or a vision where someone was praying at the foot of her bed, and when she woke up fully conscious, she contacted this person, and they happened to be praying at the same time about her.
Okay,
that's cool.
I was wondering about your experience with that and some advice going forward in that conversation.
Yeah.
Oh man, Ross, I know you have some experience on this. You care to jump in on this first?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm always really interested in the point in a conversation with a believer where you get to that point where they kind of share for them the linchpins of their beliefs. And usually it is something like that, like amazing coincidences that have happened in their life or things that have been provided for them, or, visions like these. I think the first thing you can do is just kind of acknowledge, yeah, that's cool. That's really cool that you called her and she was having the same sort of thoughts about you, that she was praying at the same time. You can acknowledge that because that is cool. Now, you might, as you kind of look into the story, if the person seems willing to investigate and sort of explore just the parameters of this story, you might be able to introduce little bits of not even doubt per se, but just kind of shades of nuance and kind of point to, well, maybe she was actually thinking about you the day before, or even just statistically, you can kind of unpack it and tell a similar story that you've had of an amazing coincidence that was a coincidence, but was cool. I know that some friends and I had started a website a while back, and it still kind of lives on as a Facebook page. It's called The Odds Must Be Crazy. And what we did was we collected people's amazing coincidence stories, the times where you run into your high school friend on a backpacking trip in the Swiss Alps. Like, what are the chances of that? And we would collect these stories and do a little bit of analysis on them to say, well, what are the chances? How many people do you know in your life? What are, how many dreams do you have per night? How many of those dreams are about people? How often do you think about someone you know? And it doesn't turn out to be that you're, they weren't also thinking of you, or they didn't just die if it was like a death dream or something like that. If you become a little more attuned to those misses as well as the hits, at least you can start to kind of contextualize how these happenstances come together, and then appreciate amazing coincidences when they do happen. But I can understand why that experience was really cool for your sister, and why that would be compelling to her.
Yeah, I'll give my take on this too. I mean, Ross said it, guys. I mean, like, everybody has had something happen in their life that they saw in a dream. Like, I'm convinced of this because I think everybody has had like that experience. If you ask anybody on the street, I'm sure they can come up with something. So it's not as amazing when you think about when we sleep for every day of the year pretty much, and you dream for so much of that, and then you live so much of your life, you have so many dreams, eventually you're going to find something that a coincidence is going to happen. So in that sort of, looking down from above sense, it's not as impressive. But obviously, like, visions and dreams and stuff have been important for religious culture since, like, well, religion's been a thing. I mean, like, it's hard to think of a mainstream religion that hasn't cited dreams as like a part of their stories, So and when you do have that coincidence, like, it seems kind of powerful in that moment. It seems like, oh man, maybe there is a grand design or plan. But I think when you look at it statistically, it doesn't work. Of course, when you try to explain that to somebody, especially if it's something that's a personal experience like that, that's a bit more challenging. It's more difficult because it's like you don't want to take that away from somebody. And it kind of gets connected to those questions of theodicy as well, because there's always implications to any belief. So if you believe that God gives you an impulse to pray for Jane at the same time she's praying for you, or if he helps you find your car keys, there's also a lot of things that he's not doing. And if you think about those, it might make some of those little coincidences seem a little absurd, almost as intended events. Yeah, like I was thinking about Mark Taylor. Do you remember Mark Taylor? He's the guy who they made that movie about, the Trump prophecy. He claims that he predicted the presidency of Donald Trump because he had a dream back in like 2012, 2014 or something. And but like, if you read his story, like, he was watching Donald Trump on TV like before he went to sleep, and so like, he probably had a dream of just him as the president. Like, you know. If you even believe that, like, you've always got to be highly suspicious of any prophecies that are told after the fact, which could lead us into some fun biblical discussions. But one thing I'll leave you with, Will, is I would say, prioritize keeping the conversation alive rather than trying to immediately sort of pin her down and say, like, well, look, let's contextualize this, let's disprove this. No need to do that. Maybe introduce some of those elements, but I think the important thing is to make sure that you keep talking and have the dialogue so that you can sort of plant seeds and have deeper conversations in the future. Absolutely. And Will, here's my takeaway. I would suggest the outsider test of faith. in this circumstance. So like I would ask your sister, well, here's someone of the Muslim faith that had a dream confirming to her that, this is something that was real. Would you accept this as evidence if somebody brought this to you to confirm that it was real, and maybe think about that now.
Yeah, maybe even, I love that idea. Maybe even collect some of those stories like, in India, there's a lot of accounts of people who remember past lives, and they'll use this as evidence for reincarnation. So there's a lot of stories of young people who speak languages that they never learned, or they have very specific memories of dying as a fighter pilot or something like that. If you can find some of those accounts, maybe share them and say, well, are you sold? Does that make you believe in that particular claim?
Yeah.
That's a good tactic.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. But Will, I think that's about all the time we got for this call. I hope we were helpful for you. And thanks for calling in. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll definitely carry that forward into the next conversation.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Y'all have a good one.
Thanks for calling.
Yeah, I was thinking because we were talking about those experiences. For some reason, I was thinking about, I can't remember if I heard this on another show or if a Mormon friend told me, or former Mormon friend told me about how they were in another country and they were able to speak the language that they never grew up learning, and that was kind of considered this miracle. But it's like, oh, you're in a foreign country, of course you're going to pick up the language while you're there, like even subconsciously, like just fun stuff like that. But,
and we're storytellers. That's what we do as humans. Those are the things we remember. Those are the things that stick with us. Compelling stories, and they get improved in the retelling. And it's just something to be aware of. And I think one of the key lessons of skepticism, something that you learn, is that you begin to contextualize your own memories a little more and be a little more critical of them. And you kind of see that sort of creep that happens in the retellings of stories from other people. And it's hard to sort of introduce that into a conversation without looking like you're accusing somebody of lying or willfully making things up, when it's really just, it's a human impulse that we sweeten our stories.
Absolutely, for sure. And yeah, every time we remember that memory, it's going to be a little bit different. And unless we write it down, then we might not get the best picture. And even then, writing it down isn't always the best way. There really isn't 100% reliable way to know about these things. And with dreams and stuff too, I'm always skeptical, not even just because there's no way to verify it, because it's not like I can enter your head and see it, but it's like it's a dream, my man. Like I wake up and I'm not even half sure what I just dreamed about most of the time. So but I don't know.
You bring up a really good point though, and kind of putting on my CFIIG hat for a second. One thing that we always recommend to people when they do get the feeling that they are really good at registering predictions is to put them down somewhere where they do have a date attached to them. So journaling is awesome, but even like sending an email that has a timestamp attached to it, or uploading a YouTube video or a blog post, something like that you can point to later and say, yeah, I actually did call this. And it's not just me sort of retrofitting, what I was saying at the time, or selectively choosing the things I got right and ignoring the things I got wrong. The more you can do that, the more you can both kind of verify your own ability, but also convincingly show it to others.
Isn't it interesting how these dreams and prophecies and psychics that talk about this stuff, they'll never give a specific date when anything is going to happen. And when they do give a specific date, it's like always wrong. I don't think it's ever been right. Like, I don't know of any good exampes of how it could be.
I mean, that's a joke within the Christian church, I'll even hear this from my dad, who's still very much a Christian. The time Jesus is not coming back is whenever Harold Camping says he is, or someone makes that prediction. That's how Jesus is definitely not returning that day. Right. But they all feel it's very respectable just to say, yes, Jesus is coming at some point in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to keep it non-falsifiable. Yeah, because then you can never disprove it.
Vague, specific. We're in the end times, maybe kind of right now. It's in our lifetime. I don't know. Yeah, we'll figure it out. But
the Antichrist is this guy today, but it'll be some other guy tomorrow.
Right, absolutely. Next, I want to talk to Joe, who's calling in from Virginia. Joe, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, Dan, how are you?
Doing good. I see that you want to do street epistemology on me. You want to ask me questions about my atheism, right?
Yeah, that's what I initially called for. Can I give you a compliment first? I think you do a really good job with your show.
Oh, thank you.
And I really appreciate the way you conduct yourself. So
I appreciate that, Joe. Thanks for that.
Credit. Okay. Yeah, that's what I initially called for, but then your guest said he was open to evidence. I kind of wanted to maybe switch to the evidence for God, and maybe we could discuss that.
Well, so if you're calling to the show and we screened you for one topic, we want to stick to that one topic. So if we could just stick with that for now, and maybe if we got some time, we'll see. But let's start with that first one.
Okay, we'll start with, I've been watching a bunch of your shows, and I saw your story and how you switched from a Christian to an atheist.
Uh-huh.
So me, I went kind of the other way. I grew up as a secular, very, very secular, and I'm still secular, but I came to believe that God actually exists through a lot of arguments and different things. So I just wanted to question you on, I actually talked to Anthony when he was on the atheist experience, and I gave him a question. So my first question to you is, what argument did Anthony give you that caused you to change your mind?
Yeah, so for those who don't aware, I had a conversation with Anthony Magnabosco about half a decade ago through when I was a Christian, and that's a part of my story. I was obviously younger at the time, and I was a part of a Christian ministry and stuff, and that video is up there. You can watch it if you want, and that's my kind of conversation. But I'm always quick to point out, and in all of my interviews since then, that it was not the sole conversation that flipped me over. In fact, I don't think that's true for most people who deconvert. It's usually not one conversation. It's I think for a lot of us, it's a process. For me, it took maybe a year to really fully deconstruct my beliefs. That was definitely a stepping stone within it, and I'm really glad that I had that conversation. But it wasn't the be all end all. So if you watch in that conversation, Anthony doesn't give me any arguments to be an atheist. He's just interviewing me about my beliefs, and I was curious, and I asked him about his atheism. So there was that dialogue there, but his goal is never to be out there giving arguments for atheism or why someone should be an atheist. He's simply investigating other people's beliefs. So yeah, I would say the question's kind of null. I guess he didn't really give me an argument there, and I didn't become an atheist the next day. You know, that I was still in that deconstruction process after that.
Yeah. I don't think, I understand what Anthony does, and, and I think that's a good way to go about it. But I just don't, I think very important to the subject is having arguments for whatever position you hold.
Sure.
Those are, so.
I can agree. I can agree. If you hold a claim, you should be able to, have a reason for that claim. Yeah. There may be some reasons better than others. And maybe it's not always, well, I guess it always kind of does go into the syllogism of an argument, but I don't know, maybe some philosopher could tell me otherwise. But yeah, like I think, but at the time I had reasons for my belief as a Christian, and I just later realized that those reasons weren't good, and so or at least not up to the standards that I found to be useful in evaluating true things, right? So once I realized they weren't up to those standards, I had to drop them. And so that was kind of that process. So it wasn't really like, here's a really great argument for atheism, because I was the one making the claim as a Christian that, hey, I believe the world works this way, and that this is true, and that I have a soul, and that I'm saved, and that I'm trying to save you too. And that whole, everything that comes with that.
Yeah, I just want to go over whether God exists. That to me is the most important thing. So I know you consider yourself an atheist. I saw your interview at Apologetics, where you don't exactly know what we mean by God. So when I say, do you believe in God, I'm kind of saying, do you believe there's a mind behind the universe? And
I don't believe in like these higher kinds of consciousness. I think we observe order because I think that's a good evolution strategy for us to be able to view things in order. I don't think that to us, our ability to view things having some sort of kind of order is necessarily evidence of a divine, though. So yeah, that's why I use the term atheist, which basically means I don't think that there's any kind of unambiguous word for God or definition of God that I can agree or disagree to, because every time somebody talks about God, they mean something different. So if I say I believe in God or I don't believe in God, that might be true for some things. Like if you say God is the universe, yeah, I believe the universe exists, so I could agree with that. Then I wouldn't be an atheist. So atheist is the label I use for that.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like a mind. That's what, the general concept of God is a mind that created everything outside of itself, which I'm guessing you don't believe exists.
No, I don't think so. And I don't think Ross does either, right, Ross? Do you?
I don't.
Yeah.
I agree with Dan that, you could describe God in so many different ways, but I think you actually characterize that pretty well, Joe, just like sort of a base definition of God. And I wouldn't sign on to that either. There's many different responses to that concept, but one would be, well, where did that mind come from? At some point, you have to explain where things come from. And we have a pretty good way of using all of the knowledge that we do have through science to get us back to the very early origins of the universe as we know it. And it's kind of a progression of complex back to maybe simpler forms and simpler rules and laws of physics. And I think it kind of does quite a bit of heavy lifting just to insert the word God there and say it all had to come from there. At some point, we just say there are things we don't know, and we'll do the best we can to figure them out.
Okay, I think you were like pointing to one of the arguments that I was kind of interested in talking about, which was the argument from contingency. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. When you said, where does God come from? Obviously, are you guys aware with of that argument?
Yes, but you should define it in your own terms, just in case it might be different from what we know, and also for the audience.
Okay. Well, contingency is kind of, everything that's contingent is created by something else, and it's not on its own. It can't exist. It needs something else for its own existence. Or, an event can't happen unless something causes that event. Correct? So this series of events, cannot go back infinitely.
I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I mean,
that's really stretching the bounds of our own experience, and that's the kind of rule that you make based on what you know. But obviously, even if you trace everything back to God, you're still invoking things we don't know, which again is what caused the uncaused causer.
Yep.
Can I explain to you why it's impossible for the infinite series to occur?
Well,
can you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a couple reasons why an infinite series cannot occur in reality. The first reason is, any finite number plus any finite number is always going to be a finite number. So the series of events cannot go back in, one event at a time will always be finite. Do you understand that one?
Okay, so let's say this is true though. Wouldn't this mean that God couldn't exist because we couldn't have an infinite regress? So why does God get to be the exception to that rule?
Well, the rule is, since the finite, God is believed to be atemporal. He's not in time.
Okay.
So this series of events would have to come back, and whatever caused this series of events, whether it's God or something else, there has to be a first cause to this.
Well,
the first event.
If we're saying there's a first event, right? There's a cause that implies time, doesn't it? Because you can't have a cause without your time happening. So how can something be outside of time and then also affecting time?
I didn't mention time. I just mentioned there has to be a first event.
Right.
Well, you said he wasn't temporal, so that's mentioning time.
Yeah. If it's events, right? If events happen in time, right? Unless events happen outside of time, but I don't know if that even means anything.
I think the argument goes where simultaneously God, the creation was simultaneous with the first event, the creation of the universe.
Well, I think the situation we're getting into here is where we're struggling with some really esoteric concepts that just aren't intuitive, that we don't have any real grasp upon because we don't have any experience in our lives to deal with such quandaries. And then we're playing word games on top of that, where we try to hook up these concepts to words that we can use that sort of get us around those concepts. But I don't think we're actually solving anything. I think we're just inserting terms as kind of space fillers to kind of get us to that emotion of feeling like we found an answer. So I think at some point we just have to admit, we don't fully understand that. And there are people on this planet who understand this better than I do, like actual cosmologists who could give you a more cogent answer. But I think at some point, all of us have to say like, there's things we don't understand, but that's not a reason to insert something that we don't know for sure as certainty.
Right. And, also just the problem I typically have with these arguments, Joe, is these tend to be like the God of logical syllogisms. It's like if we define God within certain terms, and if we agree to these certain philosophical concepts, then we can know God to exist. And I find this to be pretty weak. Because the most typical common response is that only gets you to deism, right? It doesn't necessarily get you to one specific God, but even beyond that, if there is a God, and if he is the Christian God, which almost every time I've had this conversation, they are talking about the Christian God, then there's other things that can demonstrate that besides philosophical arguments that may or may not be true, depending on the definitions that we agree to and whatnot, right? So like, I would be more impressed if there was something more demonstrable than just argument by itself, because an argument without evidence, it doesn't really appeal to me. I'd like to see something more substantial, and I'm just not sure that Christianity can provide that for me, which is why I don't identify as a Christian. But I don't know, Joe. I don't know how to help you.
Well, you don't need to help me. It's all right. But you don't need to help me. But of course, this argument doesn't get you to the Christian God. It just gets you to something eternal.
Sure. Well,
self-existent.
But I think to Dan's point, it is kind of used as a wedge where you say, well, hey, at least we got to this, deistic God. Now that I've gotten you there, let's talk about Jesus. But I applaud the.
You have to get from one, for somebody who's an atheist, you're not going to just go, if you don't believe God exists, of course, Christianity is not true. So you have to get to the first argument that God most likely exists. Then, the evidence for Jesus is separate. And I also had, let me
ask you this, Joe. Let me ask you this. Did the followers of Jesus, or anybody who's ever believed in, like most people in Christianity, did they come to their belief because of these philosophical syllogisms, or did they come to their belief for other reasons? And if so, were those reasons valid? And if they are, can we explore those reasons?
Everybody, of course, probably most people, 99% of people don't come to logical. But me, I came through, I think the argument from contingency, I don't know if you've ever listened to guys like Ed Feser and David Bentley Hart, two really smart philosophers, and Thomas Aquinas and the argument from motion. So, these are similar arguments to this one. And I think they get you to something that's eternal. And that's just the first part of, getting to the argument, to the evidence of there being something that exists eternally. So, which I think has to happen. It's, if you listen to some of the really smart guys like Josh Rasmussen, I don't know if you've listened to these apologists, but
they're certainly smart guys, and that's why they're able to use their considerable intellect to kind of work back, as Dan was suggesting there, kind of from something that they came to believe for different reasons, and to kind of work back logically to support for that belief. But I think that's more of a testament to the ability of the human intellect rather than to maybe the underlying claims themselves.
Yeah, Christian. I think the apologist. I don't want to say the apologist industry. Hold on, Joe. I want to make this point real quick, because it's like, when we come up with new arguments for God, right? Because a lot of this stuff is kind of new in the sense that, Thomas Aquinas obviously is a couple centuries old, but like the modern cosmological arguments that we have and stuff are developments of older and previous ideas. And for every new argument that we have for Christianity, that suggests that the other arguments either weren't sufficient enough, because otherwise we wouldn't need to make new ones. But beyond that, right? Like the people who are making these arguments are developing, as Ross was saying, like on other things. Like in the past, centuries, we've never experienced God in any kind of new way, as far as I know, that could demonstrate to us beyond philosophical arguments. I mean, I'm just not convinced of that. And again, like if we can believe in God through other ways, why not do it through more reliable, demonstrable ways than these, high-end arguments that take specific understandings to get there? It just doesn't make sense to me. It seems like a rationalization for something that people already believe, like Ross says. But anyway, that's more my opinion.
What do you mean? What do you mean demonstrable ways?
What do I mean by demonstrable ways? Well, Christianity. I don't think you can, Joe. That's the thing. I don't think you can. Like, I think if you could, well, Frost maybe has some ideas, but
right. Well, I mean, we could list tons of them. Earlier, we mentioned like rearranging the stars in the sky, or what if you saw a photograph or even video of an approaching tsunami wave about to hit a community, and all of a sudden an invisible hand comes out of the sky and stops it, and you see the shape of the hand stopping the wave, and it's from multiple angles, and you have multiple attestations of this. Those would be the kind of things, if they happened all the time, we'd live in a very different universe and world than we do right now, and we'd have to take that into an account. And people will say, oh, well, you wouldn't believe even if you saw that. Well, let's at least try that. Let's see that.
You can pull a Matt Dillahunty and just say, oh, well, I don't believe. Matt Dillahunty said, when asked if somebody parted the waters in Jesus' name, he said, no, I still wouldn't believe. They would just, or in his debate with Mike Licona, he said, even if someone get his head chopped off and reattached, I still wouldn't believe. I would see someone with their head chopped off.
Because the reason why Matt said that, though,
infinitely skeptical.
But the reason why Matt said that, though, Joe, is because me seeing the Red Sea part does not make Christianity true. Like, one does not necessarily lead to the other. If the claim was somehow we could, like, if I was like a prophet of God or something, and I was saying, I know these things to be true, I don't know, even then, though, that would actually still demonstrate the truth of Christianity. All it means is something happened to the Red Sea. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is a eternal, atemporal God out in the universe, and that Jesus did the things that he did and everything else. So that's why Matt is saying those things.
You're arguing with Ross's point right now, because Ross is the one who said that, that would make him believe that God exists.
Well, hold on. I would take it seriously. Okay, so if we lived in the kind of universe where these sorts of things happen regularly, and to Dan's point, Dan was making a very logical point, is if they could be demonstrated to be tied specifically to the beliefs of Christianity, then we'd be talking. Like in the Bible, you have Elijah against the prophets of Baal, and he calls upon God, and God sends down fire from the sky, and it sets the altar ablaze. If you could actually repeat that sort of thing, then we'd have to take that very seriously if it was repeatable, if it was reliable. But then we'd probably be living in a different world than the one we live in.
Yeah, and also like
if it was repeatable, then that would just be like a normal thing.
Because you could repeat it under specific circumstances. If only a Christian, for example, because this is what the Bible at least claims, if you follow the apostles, right? The apostles were able to heal people. Joe, I gotta talk.
I haven't brought up the Bible.
Hold on, Joe. Hold on, Joe. I gotta mute you here. Listen. The apostles were able to heal people based on their belief. This was something that was attested to in the New Testament, right? Like this was a thing that was happening. I mean, if we could find that people are getting their arms back, and the only way this was happening was that people who are calling themselves Christians were able to do it. I mean, there is something there. There is something there. But so far, I've never seen a Christian doctor do more than a Muslim doctor or a Buddhist doctor or anybody else could do. There's nothing specific about that belief that has ever made a meaningful difference in terms of healthcare.
Joe made a good point there, which is that, well, then it would be an everyday occurrence. Okay, but we would have to take, like, science would expand to incorporate that explanation.
Sure. Yeah. Phones are pretty cool, and they work in magical ways, but they work in specific ways. the 5G works in specific ways that we can demonstrate
not mysterious ways.
Not in mysterious ways, and not certainly give you any illness. Anyway, sorry, Joe, we have to cut things off here anyway, because we got to get to some other callers. But if you want to talk more about me with it next time, feel free to call back. I think we got some progress there. I think we went on a couple of different rabbit holes, but yeah,
we could have talked a lot more with Joe about a lot of things, but yeah, I like the cut of his jib. I like the spirit with which he's approaching things, and as it says even in the Bible in 1 Peter 3:15, it says like always be ready with an answer for your faith, your reason for believing. So that's something I think I take away from my Christian upbringing. Now, always have a reason for what you believe. Yeah,
and like if God was real, if the Christian God was real, there are ways he could know to convince me. There are ways that he would be able to do, like unquestionably I would be able, he would know what makes me tick. And so far I'm not in that headspace. It hasn't happened for me yet. And what's worse is that the reasons why I did believe, even if I was a Christian again, right, for some reason, I wouldn't want to believe for those same reasons that I believed before, because I think the reasons I believe were bad. And I think that a lot of the reasons why people believe are bad. Maybe not all of them, but certainly some of them. I don't think that's controversial.
You hit on something really important for me in my own deconversion, which I'll say, kind of like yours. It took me about 1.5 years to sort of slow boil before I finally was ready to have sort of that final conversation with God, where I said, you know what, I need to just try looking at the world this new way and see what happens. But one of the things I said to God in that conversation was that, well, first of all, I'll always be open to, future evidence, but also, if you know me, like I think you do, you know exactly what I need to see. And I know it is a wicked generation that asks for a sign, but also, you've given signs to Gideon and others within the Bible who asked for them, and some who didn't. So, you know what it would take for me to believe. And that would be the first component, is that God would have that understanding and could know what I need to see.
Yes, and I don't need special pleading for God if God is real. Like, I don't think we have to put it in that space. Like, if I wanted to demonstrate that Ross was real, I don't have to use abstract philosophical arguments with complex terminology to make that case. There are way easier ways to do it. And if God was real, it seems like there would be way easier ways, considering all the things that God has claimed to done, at least the Christian God, right? So anyway, there's obviously it's a complex subject, and we're talking about a bunch of different kinds of categories of arguments, but I still hold to my point that we can go down this road. We can talk about these terms, and I can meet you halfway on some stuff. And I get it. Skepticism can seem endless. We can be skeptical about all kinds of things, but there are some things that are more reasonable than others to believe. And the God claim for me is just not one of them, at least most mainstream ones. So,
and alluding to our earlier conversation too, by believing in the Christian God, you are, by virtue of that belief, rejecting a lot of other beliefs.
Yes.
And I think we're trying to be equanimical about that and say, well, I'm rejecting all of the above on the same grounds, because if I take kind of your particular reasoning seriously, I have to take this equivalent reasoning seriously. If I take your personal story seriously, I have to take these other personal stories seriously. So, don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, and personal as well. We need to get to the next caller. But I will just say, you could convince me of deism, and you still couldn't convince me of Christianity. I think there's way too many problems there with the Bible and how it was written, and the stories that we have there. Maybe one day I could be a deist. It's a tough sell for me to be a Christian specifically, though, honestly, at least for me.
The Bible's got a lot of pages. It could have spelled out a lot of these things, that our caller was trying to spell out for us. It had plenty of room. Could have cut out some sheep and goats. And made that
right.
case.
And I don't think all the authors of the individual books of the Bible even agreed with their own idea of what God was, or the theologies that they profess anyway. So
that's when the Bible gets more interesting, the second you realize that.
Yeah, absolutely. But we got, this is a call-in show. We got to talk to some more callers here. So let's go ahead and talk to Adam, calling in from Illinois. Adam also wants to ask me questions about atheism. So yeah, let's hear it, Adam.
Hey, Dan, it's me again from last week.
Yes. Welcome back. And happy to hear from you. What's going on?
First of all, I just want to thank you for just letting people talk. You're just so awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. Hey, I want people to give their reasons for their belief. This is of us examining that. And unfortunately, I have to control the show somehow, so it's not total chaos. But yeah, I try to be as reasonable as I can with this stuff. So thank you for that.
Okay, now, do you want me to just get right into it, or just you said some things. I've been listening to the show this whole time. Just, there's a lot of things I wanted to comment on, but just to get to my what I told the screener was your street epistemology.
Street epistemology. Yes, it's a big word, but it's the study of knowledge.
Oh, okay. Street epistemology, and basically you're just trying to plant the seeds of doubt in people against God.
Oh, no. So, well, so the history of street epistemology is a frayed one. Originally, it started with a book. I think it was 2014 by a guy named Peter Boghossian, and the book's title was A Manual for Creating Atheists. And so Peter Boghossian did what the story goes was that it was his publisher that chose that name for him. It wasn't his personal idea, but he had created this with the intention that, yeah, atheists could use this method to deconvert people essentially, or at least question them about their beliefs to change their minds. But the street epistemology community, that's not really their goals, right? So street epistemologists in general, and again, I'm just speaking broadly for the group, is to ask people about what they believe and why, and to see, if by asking these questions, if there's any changes that one could reasonably make about their own beliefs. And yes, predominantly the street epistemology community is full of atheists, but you will also find that street epistemologists have lots of conversations with atheists about why they're atheists as well, and go beyond just the God questions. I mean, they talk about all kinds of things, like whether or not a bluebird somebody saw was actually their grandmother reincarnated. That's one that I always think of. So do street epistemologists talk about God with people a lot? Yeah, absolutely. Is their intention to sow doubt? Not necessarily. Their intention, in my view, is to see whether or not the reasons why somebody might believe in something are good ones. And that good is going to be subjective to the asker and also to the person being asked. So the person being asked might still think at the end of their conversation, yeah, I think my reasons are good. Or by having this conversation, they might realize, hey, maybe I need to reevaluate my beliefs. So there you go. That's a complex explanation of street epistemology.
Well, I like it. That's good. That sounds good to me. So technically, if you're causing people to doubt God, this would actually be like a really bad thing in the Bible.
We're getting some static on your end here, Adam. I'm going to put you in the queue really quickly and see if the crew can do anything about that, because we can't hear you. I can't hear what you're saying. But anyway, Ross, do you know about street epistemology? Are you a fan?
Yeah, I read A Manual for Creating Atheists, and we were just talking before the show. Reed Nicewander is a good friend of mine as well, and I like the aim of street epistemology, and many people have kind of compared the format of our show a little to that. That's not quite what we're about, because we're all about the firsthand experiences of visiting these various groups, and we don't go in there. We certainly do ask questions to get answers and see the form of those answers, but we're not doing that same kind of Socratic method of trying to kind of walk people through the underpinnings of their faith such that we would get them to ask more profound questions that would cause them to, maybe doubt them, as our caller Adam was suggesting.
Yes. Yeah. And I talked about this last week as well, but for those who, maybe missed that, but, I talked with Reed Nicewander, who is a president of Street Epistemology International. I'm very much inspired by the street epistemology community. I don't think what I do on this show is pure street epistemology either, for a number of reasons. One being, this is a call-in show, and I have another guest that's on the line, and we're talking. I'm able to mute the conversation, and I can, it really is an illusion about who we get to talk to, right? I mean, we have call screeners. We get to see who gets to come on. Obviously, I try to get as many people on as I can, but the dynamic is a bit different. I think a pure street epistemology conversation is a one-on-one conversation with somebody and doing. And if you stick purely to that method, you will get results in a different way than you might on a show like this, where I might ask a street epistemology type question or two, but like, we also talk about other things, and then my guest might interject, and then we go on rabbit trails, and it's suddenly not sticking pure to the method. But I do believe in the method. I do think it is a good tool in the toolbox to use when having conversations. I certainly don't think it's the only way.
Conceptually, it should be available to everybody. So a Christian could also engage in street epistemology. Yes. And I think Adam was kind of jumping to the conclusion, and I think that's where he was going with his next question, that that this is a tool necessarily aimed at disabusing people of belief in God. Doesn't have to be. It's getting them to examine their beliefs and how certain of those beliefs they are. It's a useful exercise for anybody.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that book has the title that it does. It's unfortunate. I think it's unfortunate that the atheist community is the first ones to really pick up on this, because I think that does kind of make things harder to try to teach the method out there. I mean, really, what it is just a modified Socratic method. I think a key difference between Socratic method and street epistemology is that Socratic method might ask rhetorical questions for the sake of asking, for making an argument, whereas you're not trying to make an argument with street epistemology. You're really not. You're really trying to evaluate somebody's confidence level about their belief and see if that changes based on asking questions about that belief. So it is a bit different. So I have Adam back on here. Let's see if we can get you on the show here. Adam, you are back on Truth Wanted. Let's see if the crew could do their magic. What's up, Adam?
Did they do their magic? Can you hear me?
Sounds good to me. Sounds good
Magical.
to me.
Oh, goodness. Thanks, magic.
All right. So we talked a little bit. I don't know if you could hear some of it, what we were saying there while you were going in between calls. But we did talk about this idea of street epistemology and what it means as an atheist being in the community and stuff. And also just like... how we both think, at least Ross and I are both agree on the conclusion that anybody can really use this method if you stick to it and don't choose to, assuming like if you're just asking questions about someone's belief, you don't have to be an atheist to do that. You really don't. And I would encourage anybody of any particular persuasion of faith to ask those kinds of questions. And I just think that's a good thing to do.
A lot of this also gets tied into Bayesian reasoning, which is just a fancy way of trying to put numbers to your beliefs and your level of certainty. And, usually you can enter a conversation with a certain level of certainty about any given belief or claim or thought, anything you can describe as a sentence. You could say, I'm about 75% sure. I'm not sure how sure I am, but that sounds about right. And then someone can give you reasons or ask you probing questions, and that can make you a little more certain, a little less certain, depending on what the claim is. And so really it's an approach, it's a tool, and it doesn't have to be necessarily even about this topic.
Yep. So
you're just asking questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but not in like the nefarious, like I'm just asking questions kind of way. More just like here's a good methodology we can follow when examining our beliefs.
Okay. Well, to stay with what I told the screener, how did you know you were a Christian?
How did I know I was a Christian? That's a great question. So I grew up
how did you become a Christian?
Yeah, great question. So for me, I grew up in two different kinds of churches. I spent the first 12 years of my life in the Methodist Church. I ended up hanging out at a Baptist church later, mostly for like family reasons. It wasn't because a switch in theology or anything. We just knew a bunch of people at this other church, and we started hanging out over there. So I was like this kind of kid who grew up Methodist and also Baptist, kind of weird hybrid. So there's a couple of different ways that a Christian could answer this. I would say that I knew I was a Christian because I was baptized. Was actually baptized twice in the Methodist Church and the Baptist Church. So I got my double duty there. And also in the Methodist Church, you're asked to take confirmation classes. So I did that when I was 12 as well, where they kind of educate you on this decision of, becoming a Christian and stuff like that. I was in the youth group. I was part of a college ministry. I was a student leader. I was also a camp counselor and a program head at a Christian camp. So I was preaching when I worked at that camp, and I also baptized when I was at that camp. So I was living the life. You know, I as much as I would reasonably call myself a Christian, and I think most other Christians would call me a Christian. There may be some particular Christians who have particular definitions that would maybe my experience wouldn't line up to, but by a mainstream definition, yeah, I was definitely a Christian.
Interesting. I'm one of those weird Christians that thinks you have to have a personal relationship with God in order to be a Christian.
Well, I believed I had a personal relationship at the time. Yeah, for sure. Like, I definitely talked about that.
Do you have a wife?
Do I have a wife? No, I am not. Where is this going?
Do you have any? Well, I'm gonna show you. Do you have any significant other in your life?
I mean, I have close friends and family, but I'm single, if that's what you're wondering, Adam. But I don't swing that way.
Okay, okay. How about your mom? Do you love your mom? And do you know your mom?
It's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Dan.
Yeah. Do I love my mother? Yes, I love my mother, and I know my mother.
Okay, so you would technically, literally, have a personal relationship with your mother.
Yes, I think by most reasonable definitions, yes, I have a personal relationship with my mother.
Okay, so did you have a personal relationship with God?
Interesting. Now, what I would say now as an atheist, I would say differently from when I was a Christian, right? I believe my experience was psychological in nature. I don't think when I prayed to God, I was actually talking to a God. I don't think when I had experiences that I described as being inspired by the Holy Spirit were actually that of a spirit. I think they were the result of cultural influences, psychological influences, and just other kinds of various natural phenomenon. I don't think my experiences there were supernatural or divine in any sense.
But I think at the time, Dan and I, when I was a Christian, would say that, yes, we did have a very personal relationship with God. And, you know, for me, kind of the dividing line of belief is prayer. Like if someone is looking for counsel or guidance in their life, that they, as a response, go in prayer to someone that they feel is listening to them for actionable intelligence, or at least to help, you know, cope and unload. So I very much had that relationship, and I'm guessing Dan did as well.
Mm-hmm.
But Dan's looking back now and characterizing how he sees that relationship in the light of today. Yep. I do very much the same thing, which we have to remain logically consistent.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to say something, but it's going to sound arbitrary. But if you actually had a personal relationship with God and then you left God, you wouldn't say God doesn't exist. You would say like you just divorced him or something like that. Whereas if you suddenly didn't.
Well, yes, semantically, I agree with you. But here's the thing. Like I used that language that made sense to me at the time because I thought that this was real. But I don't think that this is real now. So I don't use that same language. So, you know,
I don't think you were ever a Christian to begin with. You might have been raised in a Christian family. You might have gone to church. You might have been baptized. But none of that is going to make you born again. None of that is going to make you love God with all of your heart. That's just,
I think
upbringing, but that's not.
Adam, I think that's your opinion. I think other Christians would disagree. I think some Christians would say that me being baptized and having a relationship with my church and being a part of the Christian body politic, rather, is enough to quantify and qualify me as a Christian. And yes, again, I want to emphasize, I totally did believe that I had a personal relationship. But you have to think about it from my perspective, Adam. If my position is that Christianity as a whole isn't true, right, then how am I supposed to look at my experiences? How am I supposed to say, well, yeah, what was it about that, you know, that personal relationship thing? How do I justify that? And the most reasonable explanation is that it was, again, psychological in nature. It was a natural phenomenon. It wasn't necessarily divine. And here's the thing, Adam, you also have to acknowledge that this has to be true for some religions. Even if you're a Christian, you have to acknowledge that, because other people claim that they have personal relationships with divine entities as well. And if Christianity is strictly true, then those can't be real. So we have to know that at least some of those experiences aren't real. And I go farther and say my experiences as a Christian weren't valid. So,
and what Adam and I, or I'm sorry, what Dan and I, Adam, are acknowledging is that these relationships, these understandings of being in conversation with a supernatural personage, that is God or the object of another belief, that those feelings are real. And I think what you're trying to say, Adam, is that in some way, Dan or myself, people who were formerly Christians were not actually Christians. They were just pretending, or they were misguided, and any true Christian could never walk away from God. And what we're saying is that our experience was indistinguishable both internally and externally. If you looked at our lives before, when we were Christians, from any other Christian you could point to today, including yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I disagree, but I don't think you could point to anyone's life and think that you're a Christian, because I asked you, how do you become a Christian? Going to church doesn't make you a Christian. Being baptized doesn't make you a Christian.
Going to Christian doesn't make you a Christian. Going to church doesn't make you a Christian any more than going to McDonald's makes you a hamburger. Yeah, I remember hearing Keith Green say that, on the records I would listen to. And yeah, we always had different variations of that we said in church. Yeah, we get that. We know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. And the Bible even says that not everyone that says Jesus, Lord, Lord, is going to enter into the kingdom of heaven.
Yep, I said that to people too that I was trying to convince to be a Christian. Yep, we get all that.
Yeah.
So I don't think you. I wouldn't have ever considered you a Christian to begin with. But that doesn't matter. What matters now is, I don't know that you become a Christian.
Well, Adam, have you considered that maybe the definition of Christian is a subjective one, and that the entire history of Christianity, there may have never been one single unifying definition as to what a Christian is?
Well, I have a definition, but
I know you do. I know you do. But how do you know that that's the right one?
Well, a Christian is someone that loves Jesus Christ with all their heart, with all their mind, with all their soul, with all their strength, and keeps his commandments. Okay. But you can't tell if someone actually does that.
Right.
You can't say you love God.
Yeah, Adam, what you're trying to do is you're trying to quantify and sort of put strictures on people's internal belief states, which is impossible to know. So really all we can go upon is external signs of their faith, the fruits of the Spirit, however you want to point to external signs, and also their professed beliefs. And having lived as a Christian and interacted with Christians and still interacting with many professing Christians today, I think I can say that all signs point to me having been a Christian in the way you're thinking, except you're working really hard to define a Christian in such a way that they could never not be a Christian.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And this undying faith idea of Christianity isn't even true to the closest people of Jesus. Like Peter doubted Jesus even when Jesus was alive, and like the history of the church is full of people who have had doubts and have had different understandings of what it means. And I wouldn't doubt the validity of I would never say to you, Adam, I don't think you're a real Christian, because you have a very different take of what Christianity means to me. But that doesn't really matter, right? What matters is, are the beliefs that we're talking about true in the first place? We can spend all day talking about, oh, well, I did this and you didn't do this. But at the end of the day, if the belief claims are true, then that's what I want to know. That's what's going to convince me. Maybe I didn't grow up the same way you did, and maybe my interpretation of Christianity is different. So what? I'm sure if you talk to Christians 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, there's going to be some different ideas there too. I don't think there's one single eternal unifying definition. And if there is, I'm not aware of it, and I don't know how you could demonstrate that.
You are right on several things in Christianity. When the one guy said that the doubting Thomas, Jesus says, "Blessed are your eyes, because you have blessed are they that have believed but have not have seen."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And you said earlier in the show that they said that wasn't meant to be taken like literally or something.
I didn't talk about the doubting Thomas story at all today. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
One important element of the story of Thomas is that Jesus did let him put his fingers in his side.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and then he said, "Blessed are the ones who have believed and have not seen," and that's
yes.
So the other thing was, so Peter, I don't believe he was a Christian yet, because Jesus said, "When thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren." And then Peter said, "I will go with you to prison or to death." And then Jesus says, "You're going to deny me 3 times."
Hey, if Peter was the rock upon which Jesus built his church, I think he gets to be considered a Christian.
No, no, Peter's not the rock. Peter is a rock, but he's not the rock. Jesus is the rock. That's a Roman Catholic teaching that Peter is.
I think Ross's point still stands, though. I think Ross's point still stands, and that Peter is definitely a Christian.
Well, he wasn't a believer at that point, though. Like,
I mean, he followed the man around the desert for like a long time. Like, I don't know. Like, if anybody was a follower, if anybody was a believer, I mean, he saw what Jesus did. He believed. This is a problem, Adam, with Christianity.
Yeah,
this.
Adam, it sounds like you're very willing to cast other Christians aside in a second, the moment they have a doubt. I think you might need to be a little more accepting of your fellow Christians.
I would argue that, let's say that you're right in that in order to be a Christian, you have to have undying faith and attention and love for this person. And if that wavers in any way, that doesn't make you a Christian, then I don't even want to be a Christian then. Like, that is, I don't think that's a good way of living life. Honestly, I'm not committed to this atheism thing, FYI. I'm really not. I'm really open to any other kinds of beliefs, because I'm to be open is to change and to grow and to know and to understand and to like find better knowledge and a better place in the world. And if like Christianity, that definition of it, that understanding of it is preventing all of that from happening. So if everybody in the world thought that way, we would not have the progressive movements that we have now. We would not have the acceptance of the LGBT community as fellow human beings and not something to be have derision for. We would not have the advances of scientific understanding that we do, because we may be afraid of figuring out that things like evolution might contradict our ideas of what we consider to be true, that being maybe a young earth creationist position. Like, you know, again, let's say that you're right, Adam. Let's say that this is the real Christianity. I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm not convinced that it is. And I'm not convinced that Christianity is true anyway. So I don't know. I don't know if this goes anywhere.
I'm not a big fan of laying out, you know, like you're committing this logical fallacy or, you know, this logical fallacy. But you might, Adam, want to look up the no true Scotsman fallacy. And it's an approach of kind of labeling or defining a topic in such a way that you always get your expected outcome. And I think perhaps you're trying to define Christianity in a way that's going to serve your purposes, but doesn't really apply in any meaningful way to the actual Christian experience.
Yep.
I know the no true Scotsman fallacy, and
Okay.
I said there's no real way to tell if someone is a true believer other than what they say and do.
So why are you saying I'm not a true Christian then? If there's no way to tell, why are you saying I was never a Christian?
Well, you said being baptized was what made you a Christian and going to church, and you thought
Okay.
that's what made you a Christian.
Well, it sounds like you have ways of telling then.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you are lying, stealing, killing, and pillaging, and you say, "Oh,
So
yes,
there are ways.
Jesus."
So there are ways then.
Well, yes, there's ways, but there's not 100% guaranteed certain way, because you can't judge people's heart. Someone can tell you that they love you, and like you can, like if you have a wife, you can tell your wife, "I love you," but then if you go and cheat on her, then
so there are ways then.
Yeah. Well, Dan is telling you where his heart was.
Yeah.
And you're not believing him. And he wasn't pillaging, I'm pretty sure. He wasn't lying more than the ordinary. Yeah. So, I mean, sounds like a Christian to me.
Well, okay. Well, I'm saying you can't be for certain. You can't actually judge someone's true intentions. Someone could donate to charity and you think, oh, he's a good guy, but then it turns out he was just doing it just to look like a good guy, and then he's doing something nefarious.
Sure. I'm
you
with you there.
Tell, only God. Okay, yeah. Only God truly knows if you're with him or not. But on the you mentioned something.
But you said you know, though. You said that you knew. Like, you said you were certain that I was not a Christian. So how did you know? What method did you use?
So I'm gonna. It's the.
I think maybe you suspect, Adam, that God knows, but that God tends to agree with you.
Wait, what? Can you say that again?
I'm getting the sense that you're saying only God knows who is a Christian, but I think you have very strong opinions on who is a Christian, and that you just kind of feel that God tends to agree with you on these matters.
Well, no, if you can know whether or not you have a relationship with someone, like you have a relationship with your mother.
Yeah, I know I had a relationship with God. I told you that.
Yeah.
I did too.
Yeah. That's how we contextualize.
But again, but we could be lying. We could be lying. Like
I could be.
You could be lying.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, what's the point?
I know. Well, that's the point is you can't know for certain, but there are signs that would indicate it. Like, if I told you there's a box and if you stick your hand in the box, it's going to kill you, and you see 50 other people sticking their hand in the box and they don't die, that doesn't mean that it won't kill you, but there's reason to believe it won't kill you.
So what reasons do you have to believe, Adam? We got a couple minutes here. We got to wrap it up. What reasons do you believe that you have, that because you apparently know my entire life, which is interesting. I'm really glad that you know more about my own story than I do. But you say that I was never a Christian. So why? Why is that? What reasons did you use to conclude?
I'll tell you, and then I'll let you go because I know you have other things to do. And thank you for letting me talk anyway. If you read Jesus's parable of the sower, you fit in with the seed that was cast among the thorns.
Okay, so your interpretation of this parable is led you to conclude that I was never a Christian.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Adam. That's all the time that we got for now. Appreciate you calling in, and you have a good rest of your night. So I wasn't a Christian because Jesus talks about the parable of the sowers and stuff, and
you fell on the stony ground.
I fell on the stony ground. That's right. So it's almost as if if you create a system by which anybody who doesn't believe what you have to say is automatically wrong by definition, then you can just say that you're right because you believe it. And if you don't believe it, then you're wrong. Right? That's falsifiability right there.
Yeah, we were talking about arbitrary. That sounds pretty arbitrary.
Yeah, yeah. And this is a problem that's obviously not unique to Christianity, but unfortunately, Adam is not the first person I've ever talked to who has questioned the very nature of my Christianity. And Ross, I'm sure you've had several conversations with people who do this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, no offense to Adam, I think it's a rude tactic because essentially you're just not taking someone at their word and you're trying to tell them about your personal story, but their personal story is not comfortable or convenient for you. And so they're just discounting your entire life and experience in that relationship and understanding that you had and devoted years to. I don't like that.
Yeah, I don't like it either. And I would never tell you, Adam, I would never tell a Christian I have ever met in my entire life that they aren't real Christians. Okay, I can say that maybe what they follow isn't consistent with other beliefs of Christianity, but your identity is your own and you have a right to that. And I also have a right to my own identity. And I can be honest with myself and my own story and know my life experiences and trust myself in that. And I also have more evidence than honestly a lot of the atheists that do stuff on the internet, because I have a video of me as a Christian explaining my beliefs in full. And so and that was on my way to a meeting, like as part of my student ministry. Okay. What more do you want from me, Adam? The fact that I don't follow Christianity anymore doesn't mean that my beliefs weren't sincere at the time. And quite frankly, that's a cult tactic right there.
And if you're going to say that only God knows someone's heart, you have to leave it there. That's the last authoritative word you can say on the topic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a suspicion that you want to put me in this box because my story and others like it cause discomfort in your ideas of this belief, and that there has to be some reason other than this belief isn't true that we don't believe anymore. It can't be that this belief isn't true. Well, because this belief has to be true. So what explains the rest of us then? Where did we come from? How did we get to where we are? And this is where stereotypes about non-Christians come from, that we've had emotional trauma in our lives, that the church somehow hurt us in some sort of way, and it's awful and it's disgusting. And myself and other former Christians have to deal with it all the time. So like Ross said, it's rude and I don't appreciate it, but do what you got to do, I guess. Anyway, we're wrapping things up for the end of Truth Wanted. I want to give a special thanks to Ross for being on the show. Thank you, Ross.
My pleasure.
Yeah, don't go away just yet, though, folks. We are going to go to the Discord after show for a little bit, so stick around. The link to that is going to be in the description. But first, Ross, I want people to know, where can people find you at?
Oh, we're on MaximumFun.org. That's our podcast network. Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Look for us anywhere podcasts are sold or given away free, because you'll find us there. And also ohnopodcast.com. We're on Facebook at ONRAC, ONRAC. That's just the acronym for our show. And also on Twitter at Oh No Podcast.
All right, great. And folks, this is Truth Wanted. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, follow us on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts as well. This is a live show, happens every week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Again, I'm Objectively Dan. You can follow me on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, or you can follow the show on Twitter at Truth Wanted. There's a couple of different ways you can support the show. One is by becoming a member on YouTube. It's really cool. If you're watching this live, you might have saw those little emoticons and stuff. You can do that by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents. You just come on, and it's one way to support the show. Another way to do it is through patreon.com. Patreon.com/truthwanted is a great way to do it. And you can get merch through our stores. We have a link for that in the description for Bitly. We got masks, we've got hoodies and shirts and stickers and all kinds of great stuff. It's cool. That's just another way to get involved. You can also email the show. It's truth@atheist-community.org. And there's a Facebook group as well for Truth Wanted fan group. It's pretty cool. You guys should check it out and join on there. All right, folks, here's the thing. Last week, I committed a grave sin, and I forgot to thank the wonderful, amazing, awesome crew that helps run this show. I know. I'm supposed to thank him every week because this show would not happen without him. So thank you so much, crew, for doing what you do. We got the crew cam there. There's the crew cat as well. Look at these guys. Look at these handsome, handsome boys. They're just great, and we love them. And this show would not be a thing without them. So I'm sorry about last week, guys. You guys are great. I love all the volunteers that help make this thing happen. And thank you guys so much for what you do. Ross, before we wrap things up, you got any closing comments, final thoughts?
Tune in if you want to hear the exciting denouement of our demonology experiment becoming exorcists, and we'll have more fun interviews and adventures to come. Yeah, for sure. Guys, go listen to Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Again, this is me, personal endorsement. Objectively Dan is a fan of the show. Go watch it. It's great. Or listen to it. You can't really watch it, but they're good stuff. I like what they're doing. Folks, remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.